My investment portfolio is solid.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Ernie Howard.
I'd like to thank a few sponsors before we get into today's show, because it's those sponsors that allow us to keep bringing you shows day after day. The Son of Earp series by Chuck Buda, Shifters, Ghosts, and Demons, all set within the backdrop of the Old West. James Johnson, illegitimate son of the legendary Wyatt Earp, dreams of adventure and following in his daddy's footsteps. His mentally disabled friend Carson stands by his side. Together the friends wage war against evil. The Son of Earp series has it all. Supernatural forces are at work and the body count is rising. Can James and Carson save their cursed friend? Will they defeat the haunted gunslinger before more innocents die? Can James and Carson defeat the possessed before the demon hits the Chisholm Trail? Or will the devil win the West? Curse of the Ancients, Haunted Gunslinger, Summoner of Souls. The Son of Earp series is available in paperback, ebook, and audio formats exclusively from Amazon or free through Amazon Kindle Unlimited. Pick it up from Chuck Buda today. There's a link in the show notes. Mad Jones, Heretic by Quinn Hillier. Mad Jones Heretic delivers sharp satire on modern religion, politics, and media, all at the same time, along with insightful representations of the vagaries of today's celebrity culture and the lunacy of internet comment threads. Controversies surrounding race and sexual morality enter in as well. Additionally, its setting at the end of the 20th century in the midst of the Y2K computer scare provides the perfect vehicle to dissect millennialist themes as well. Mad Jones Heretic by Quinn Hillier. And Craig Martell and Scott Moon's brand new kickoff to their Dark Landing series. The first book is called Assignment Dark Landing. A frontier world, one sheriff, and all the action one spaceport can't handle. Dark Landing is the wild, wild west of known space. Sheriff Thaddeus Fry will never completely leave the battlefields of Centauri Prime. His new assignment, the Sheriff's Office of Dark Landing, could be a do-nothing job, or it could get him killed. The first thing he learns is that his predecessor's headquarters were bombed, creating the vacancy that led to his appointment. The company man is not who he expected, to say the least. His new accommodations are right in the center of Dark Landing's misfits. He finds one native willing to talk to him and tries to make him a deputy. What really matters on Dark Landing are the mines. Faced with a dangerous collapse that could kill hundreds of workers, he leaps into action and gets the story of Dark Landing started. Fans of Firefly, Bonanza, and Tombstone will love the new series. It's going to be releasing every 18 days, so go pick up a copy of Dark Landing as the series kicks off and watch for it. Scott and Craig were on the show right before Christmas, so go back and listen to that episode and get a full, deep understanding of everything that you're doing. Thank you for listening. As always, stay tuned at the end of the show for an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. Now on to our interview. Essence, Book 1, Septima, the first volume in the exciting new science fiction series by Nick Breaker. Troy is no longer himself. Kidnapped by aliens infected with the essence of the dead General Tomas, Troy grasps at his only hope of survival. He merges his soul with the alien parasite trying to possess him, leaving him forever changed, and not entirely for the worse. Once plagued by crippling phobias, Troy is now fearless, willing to fight his enemies with his bare hands. But with his new strength also comes a new weakness: women. Tomas was notorious for his insatiable desires, and Troy finds himself constantly resisting temptation, especially the gorgeous, manipulative Alta. Although Alta has convinced the Pyrrhans she's helping them prepare to battle the murderous Reptarans, she's actually meticulously planning to steal their ultimate power source and then abandon them to their fate. Alta won't hesitate to kill anyone in her way, and her deep love for Tomas is Troy's only advantage. He convinces Alta that Tomas has taken full control of his being and thus keeps her trust and his life. While Alta schemes, Troy covertly struggles to save the Pyrans and prevent the Reptarans from invading Earth. But first, he must wrest back control of his own soul. Essence, Book 1, Septima, the first volume in the exciting new science fiction series by Nick Breaker. Find it on Amazon today. There's a link in the show notes. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to get to hang out with my buddy Ernie Howard. Ernie was on a show last year with Eric Totzi. We did a writer's workshop show, and I was talking to Ernie a little while back and said, "Man, we need to get you back on the show with just you, so we can just hang out and talk writing and stuff." So Ernie was gracious enough to join us today. Welcome to the show, Ernie.
Hey, what's going on, Hank?
Man, trying to save the world one podcast at a time.
I'm glad that you finally got some better guests than me and Eric.
Man, y'all are awesome. That's I was telling somebody yesterday that we've made some pretty good friends at some of the big publishers, and they're have sent us a lot of great guests. But at heart, I'm an indie author, and I love what's going on in the indie space. And, some of the best times I have on the podcast are getting to talk to other indie authors who are, out there on the grind every day, making it happen, connecting directly with the readers. And there's just something powerful about, the power of the pen, and the publisher getting put in the hands of the writers, and I love that. So that's one of my favorite things to do, is get to hang out with other authors that are, doing what I do and trying to make it happen every day. But
you get those free books, man.
Well, there's that. I've got to get some more bookshelves. That's crazy. But I start each show with the same question, and the question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
I think I told you this last time. It was
but we're gonna let you get deep.
Okay. Well, I mean, it was pretty simple. Basically, it was I watched Star Wars just like any other kid when I was little, and my mom actually wrote, and she never finished a book. She wrote screenplays and actually sold one, and I'd watch her write. And she was the one that pretty much instilled in me the love for writing and the love for books. And, I just watch her bang out page after page after page. Like, she was one of those marathon writers. I'm okay, I'll write 800 words right now, and then maybe later I'll write 1,000 words. She was like, I'll write, practically the whole book in one session with some coffee,
Right. That's crazy. What kind of stuff did she write?
She wrote, she was actually writing something about my dad's side of the family. My dad's side of the family was they were kind of crazy. How do I want to put this lightly? They were kind of, they enjoyed their their arguments, I guess. And they were interesting people. But my mom actually wrote a book about my dad's side of the family. It was called The Destroyers. It was pretty much dramatic. And then her screenplays and stuff were she wrote like a comedy. That's the one she actually sold. She didn't hear anything else about it, but I think it just got shelved or something. I don't really remember what happened, but it was a comedy about two couples that end up in the same hotel room, and they're like total opposites. It wasn't any like weird crazy romance kind of stuff, but it was more of a comedy kind of thing. And I never actually I read like the first few pages, but I never actually read the whole thing.
Having a parent around who is always writing and is kind of keeping the dream alive. That is, that's something you can't put a price on, as a kid watching that. And I've struggled, before with my kids, being too pushy and, really wanting them to do the things that I wanted them to do. And, I have two sons and they are, they like embody the two halves of me. Like one son is a complete bookworm and the other one is a complete techie nerd kind of kid. And
that's awesome.
And that's awesome. You know, but like one of them, I really want to appreciate some of the other stuff, and the other one, I want to appreciate some of this, and they just don't, you know. You know, but you know, then I'll notice that they kind of pick up things from me just by, and I've learned to just, you know, do what I do kind of in front of them, and, you know, the things that they like, they'll pick up, and you know, but having a mother who's just, you know, keeping it alive, man, that has to be such a gift.
And you got to think this was like, it was a gift, but you also got to think this was like the 80s and 90s. And this was way before, you know, you could just go to Amazon and publish something. She just missed that. She died in 2008 and she just missed that. And it's something that I wish she could have seen, because she would have flourished. She would have been on your podcast.
Oh, that's incredible, man.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
She was talented.
Well, you know,
she wanted me to play baseball, though. You know, so just
really?
with your sons, because I played high school baseball and I wasn't that bad, and I actually quit my senior year because I wasn't interested anymore, and she was so mad at me for quitting the baseball team. This is funny,
man. Yeah, if you would have kept on, we might be recording a very different podcast right now.
No, I don't think so. I wasn't that good, man. I mean, I was good. I was good for high school, but I don't think I would have made it to the majors, man.
Speaking of that, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Boulder City, which is right outside of Las Vegas. I was born in Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota. My parents moved us out here when I was 10, and we moved to a little town called Boulder City, which actually the pool is based on that town. The motel and all that, and the hotel, the Boulder Dam Hotel that's in the book and all that. That's all real.
Man. What was it like going from Minnesota to the desert?
Oh man, I remember.
Talk about culture shock.
And we moved here the day I came with my dad in a U-Haul basically across the west of America, and we were in Utah and we drove straight to Vegas, and it was July 4th in Las Vegas.
I bet that was nuts.
I got out of the U-Haul trailer, and I had never felt that kind of heat before in my life, ever. I was from Minnesota. 110 degrees with basically no humidity whatsoever.
Wow, that's intense.
Off of the street, and I was like, we go back.
What was the so the weather is an obvious thing that kind of hits you in the face literally when you step out of the truck. But what about like culturally coming from Minnesota to Vegas and or the surrounding area? What did that do? When you're 10 years old, that's pretty formative years. How do you feel like that affected you? That's maybe gone on to have something to do with you as a storyteller.
Just seeing, like, it's a good thing to bring up, because I think traveling, if you're a writer, I think you should travel as much as you can, and you should talk to as many different kinds of people as you can. I mean, I've been to Mexico, I've been to Canada, I've been to a ton of states in the United States, I've been to China, I've been to South Korea, I've been to Japan, and just seeing, just going to the Asia trip was, just seeing basically the other side of the world. You start to realize that how diverse and different this world is, and how many stories there are to actually tell. When people say they have writer's block, I don't believe it. I think you have writer's laziness, to be perfectly honest, and I've had writer's laziness a ton. And because I have stories, I have to almost delete story ideas because I have too many, and traveling is probably key, or just getting out and doing something different every day is key to the imaginative process, in my opinion.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think you got to get out and talk to people, because the no matter what kind of stories you tell, I like to think of genre as just kind of the window dressing, whether it's a horror or a science fiction or fantasy or whatever. That's the window dressing to tell the story about people. And if you don't actually know people, it's hard to write stories about people.
Yeah, I've had a lot of writer friends. Exactly, I've had a lot of writer friends who well, not actually songwriter friends. One of my song friends that was one of the best guitarists I've ever known, and he wrote amazing songs. Told me one time, he's like, I can't write good music unless something is kind of going wrong in my life, or I have some kind of adversity. And I think it's kind of, well, I mean, not true with everybody, but it's kind of true with me too. I need a little bit of something going on in my life. Like, I need a little bit of noise when I write. I need a little bit of, I don't know. Maybe I'm weird like that. Some people need complete silence, but I need a little bit of something to, I don't know.
Oh, no, I'm the same way. I have 5 kids, and we all live in a smallish house, and there's just even though they're all tame kids, there's always a little rumble of chaos, and if you put me in a completely silent room, I feel like the world's coming unhinged, because that's not what normal is.
No.
So
I
get
3
that.
boys, so I understand.
Yeah. But I was listening to I think it was Joe Rogan. I listen to his podcast all the time.
I do too.
And he was talking. Actually, I think I've heard him have this conversation a couple of different times. But he was talking with someone, and he was talking about how comedians, and I think there's a lot of parallels between stand-up comics and writers. And I don't mean just joke telling, but just kind of the learning the craft and the delivery. I think there's a lot of similarities. But they were talking about, that he strives hard to give his kids, a very stable environment and all this. And he said,
saw this one. Yeah.
Yeah. But the most creative people kind of come from effed up childhoods, and he was like, are they going to be completely uninteresting people because, because we've given them a stable home. And I kind of get that.
Yeah, I totally. I mean, I wouldn't say, I didn't come from like a crazy abusive household or anything, but I had, adversity when I was a kid. And I mean, you're not Barbara Walters. I'm not going to get into my childhood, but
tell us about it, Ernie.
Yeah, exactly. And so I start crying. Oh, hey.
Let it out, Ernie. Let it out.
But I definitely didn't have a silver spoon,
Yeah.
And I think a little bit of adversity goes a long way. I mean, I look at my kids today and tell them to go out, and they're like, "What do we do?" And I'm like, "Oh God," So a little bit of adversity, definitely in makes you strive, I guess, for something, makes you ambitious. I believe if you get just stuff handed to you all the time, I don't think that's really a good idea. It's the whole, sophomore curse, you get a writer that comes out and writes a gigantic book that's awesome. And then the next book just stinks because they got too many accolades too quick, and I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that kind of analogy with musicians, that first album, if it goes astronomic, well, you had all these years to put that album together and to just pour everything into it and make it, tweak on it and all that before anybody knows you. And then the second album, they said was the album where they're out buying, drapes and stuff, because now they've all bought a house and they're worried about decorating instead of, putting all that angst into a new album.
Yeah, instead of writing in a notebook on a curb, with hanging out, you're just couch surfing at your buddies. You're picking the color of your mansion, and
right.
And that tends to be a little bit boring when you try to tell a story about it. Nobody wants to hear about the drapes and the couch that matches them.
Well, it's kind of like hip hop guys. Like a year or two ago, I tried to listen to like a new album that Jay-Z put out, and And it was just horrible. It was like he's a responsible grown up, and who wants to listen to that? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, he sounds like me. Why do I want to live vicariously through this? You know,
my investment portfolio is solid.
Yo,
yeah, exactly.
I got 99 problems. Yeah, I got 99 problems. Who am I kidding? I paid them all off. You know,
I don't have any problems anymore.
Right? It's just stupid. You know.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but you know, we mentioned music a couple of times. You are a musician. What did you start, you know, playing in bands and stuff when you were a teenager?
Music's always been in going back to my mom. I remember one of my first memories was hearing my mom play the piano. I mean, she wasn't a virtuoso or anything, but she played the piano. And my dad actually, when he was how old was he? He was like 20 years old. He auditioned for Dick Clark, believe it or not.
Wow,
yeah,
that's awesome.
And didn't make it, but he did audition.
But he got a story out of it.
Yeah, my brother Steve, he is a bass player and used to hang out with a lot of people in the Minneapolis music scene, you know, or like basically where the Replacements came out of, and what's the other band? I think it's Run Westy Run or something like that. He always talks about these bands, these kind of obscure but not obscure bands. The Replacement's not an obscure band, but
right,
Husker Du, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
But he is a phenomenal bass player. My niece is a phenomenal guitarist and singer and writer. Check her out, guys. Her name's Hillary Howard. Go check her out. So just a family of music, pretty much. Basically everybody likes to sing and everybody likes to I can play a couple songs on the guitar. I was always a singer in every band that I was in and lyric writer, but luckily I was surrounded by a lot of good songwriters and that sort of thing.
I've heard some of the stuff that you dug up that you posted on Facebook a while back. And
those were
I dig it. Yeah. You know,
hey, we got played on the local radio. So
and that's all you ever aspire to, you know, at that point. You're like, man, if I could hear my song on the radio.
We'd made it by then, man. We'd seriously done it.
So, what kind of parallels do you draw between songwriting and performing, and then now writing, fiction? Do you see that they are cousins, and is the creative process similar when you sit down to write a song, or when you have a story idea that you're starting to flesh out?
You know, I think the process is kind of similar, but in the long run, I don't think it's all that similar. You know, you write a song. Songs for me came from like those songs that you're talking about. Like I was like 19, 20 years old and you know, listening to Bad Religion and and trying to, you know, be an activist, I guess you would say. And I didn't know my butt from a hole in the ground. And you know, they were easy to write because I had all these pent up emotions and that sort of thing. But like writing a story or writing a novel or anything like that, you have to have some discipline, and you can't totally go with emotion all the time. You kind of have to go with a technical skill, and you know, you have to write when you don't want to. All those songs that I wrote, I wanted to write them because I had to get them out. And it's kind of the same thing with writing stories and that sort of thing, because I have to write, otherwise I'll go crazy. But with those songs and stuff, you know, it was like basically putting my feelings on paper. And with stories, I'm still putting my feelings on paper, but it's more of an idea that I go with, and then a technical side comes in, and you know, it's not as emotional, I would say. Right.
Well, yeah. You know, that kind of feeling of angst and needing to get something out, that'll serve you well as a writer, but it'll serve you for about a page and a half. And then you have to start, okay, this is just raw emotion. Now what do I do with this? How can I turn this into a compelling story? And, you know, you have to develop more than one dimension. You can just purely write a song out of angst. But if you want some nuance in a story, you're going to have to dig deeper.
Yeah, exactly. I think also that when you do that, if I were to write like I wrote songs, I would have so many false starts because you run out of gas. You can't keep that, you know, gigantic emotional ball rolling the whole time when you're trying to write, like, you know, 200, 300 pages of a story, you know?
Exactly. So what was the first story that you decided to sit down and write, and that you kind of realized that, okay, this is something I can do?
I'd say probably around 2005, I actually wrote a long form, not like, I guess you would say it was a novel, or these days 50,000 words is considered a novella, but I consider it a novel, you know, because people, you know, oh, it's got to be 100,000 words. Oh, it's got to be 80,000 words to be a novel, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, whatever. It was about 50,000 words, and it'll probably never see the light of day. And it was called Decompression. And it was a good idea, but some of the most horrible writing you'll ever read in your life. And my wife keeps making fun of me because she read it, and she said that a lot of stories, she's like, you basically just dissected this for ideas and wrote stories off of the 50,000 word book. Which, you know what, she's kind of right. So whatever. It was my story.
It's like the old Chevy truck you keep around because you're robbing parts off of, you know.
You got to get parts, man. It's my story to do it too. So
heck yeah. Well, and you know, it's that's when the writer wisdom comes out, when you realize, okay, this as a whole is not, you know, I can't publish this, but man, there were some great moments in that, and I can rescue those moments.
I basically had 50,000 words of, or 10 short stories in 50,000 words. So that's basically what it was.
I love it.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, kind of touring through Asia. What brought that trip on?
Ex-girlfriend, her parents chased solar eclipses, and
wow.
they were nice enough to bring me along.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah, they were really nice people, you know. I will say ex-girlfriend though, so they were really nice people, and they took me on a trip of a lifetime, pretty much.
That's amazing. Are there any experiences that you had from that trip that you look back on, or maybe you see now that you know, being in a foreign country, that a culture that you'd never experienced before? Can you point back to a particular story that you think that has influenced?
Well, it's anything science fiction that I've written. I mean, some of it I can point back to the boat, because the boat that we were actually on was a science cruise, and there was tons of writers from Omni and whatever Omni. Geez, I'm so drawing a blank right here. Oh my God.
The science journals.
Yeah, science journals, like geez, I can't even think right now. Science journals, magazines, science magazines, and photographers. Like, you know how, have you ever been on a cruise where they sit you with people, you know, to get to know them? And it was a bunch of German scientists, and they were actually really fun to hang out with, and not stuffy at all, and like to drink their dark beer and yell and tell you about physics.
Well, have you ever been in a room with Stefan Boltz?
Oh no, but I would love to, man. I talk to him all the time on Facebook.
Yeah, you need to. That's exactly what eating supper with Stefan Boltz is like.
I bet. My by the way, and Stefan, if you're listening, my wife absolutely thinks you're the coolest cat ever because you crack her up daily with your Facebook posts.
Oh man.
Yeah.
With a friend like Stefan, you can cut down your friends list by at least a third just by having him around.
Exactly. That's all you need for entertainment purposes anyway. But yeah, I mean, as far as writing goes, that trip taught me a lot. I mean, it taught me about how, people, it seems on, the other side of the world, it's just different. It's almost like you're visiting an alien planet rather than, a country, because the culture is so much different, but it's the same. Like when you go to Japan, it's pretty much the same. It's Americanized and all that sort of thing. But Japan is like stepping into Blade Runner. It's crazy. It's like futuristic. Anybody that likes science fiction should go to Tokyo, Japan, and you will just love it. You will seriously think you went into the future.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. One thing I'm fascinated by, Ernie, is what people decide to do career-wise while they're pursuing writing, or maybe before they even realize that they want to be a writer. What did you think you wanted to do with your life when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, I wanted to. I guess I would. The whole baseball thing. When I was a little kid, I loved playing sports and that sort of thing, and then it just kind of petered out when I got older. But I really wanted to. I thought I was going to play. Up until I was in the 9th grade, I thought I was going to play center field for the Minnesota Twins. So it's weird how things change and how your interests change once you get older. Once I got older, all I wanted to do was be in bands and write stories and that sort of thing. That was always my true calling, though. I always loved music and I always loved books. So,
what kind of stuff did you read as a kid and as a teenager? My
parents did not censor anything. I mean, I was reading Stephen King when I was like 12, and my mom was not into censoring. I mean, certain things, yeah, but like, a lot of horror and that sort of stuff I was reading. I was reading a lot of horror, science fiction, fantasy, basically the good stuff.
Yeah. Do you find that stuff has influenced the things that you write now?
Oh, of course. I mean, yeah. I mean, I went through this phase where probably when I was in my like mid 20s, where all I wanted to read was like the classics, and there wasn't many classics that I could stomach, to be honest. And I guess that makes me not a literary giant, but I want a good story. Rather than just say I read a book, I'd rather have a good story. I don't care that Stephen King isn't revered as the best writer in the world. I think he's awesome, and I enjoy reading his books. So,
well, yeah, and there's this interesting thing about Stephen King, is that he has a way of writing that is very familiar feeling. Like I can't quite put it in words, but it's not highbrow, but at the same time, it's not insulting either. Like it just feels like you're talking to a friend. He has this very easy way of just communicating people in real life, and it just feels like it's non-pretentious, and it just feels like real people. And what's so weird about it is that takes a great amount of skill to make it seem so effortless. Because if you sit down and try to write effortless, it, comes out clunky, and, you wind up like you did with a book of, 10 disconnected short stories that you rob for parts. And I've got 2 or 3 of those books in my drawer. I'm not kidding anybody. That takes a great amount of skill. And I think the people that poo-poo that are, they probably know too much for their own good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You talked about how being from Minnesota, kind of how that influenced you. But your kind of the second half of childhood is in Nevada, and how do you think that has influenced your storytelling? And being so close to Vegas, and does that seep in from time to time?
All the time. I mean, basically, I don't go down to the Strip anymore. But if you want to get ideas for a story, all you have to do is go down and sit on the Strip and people watch, and you'll get every single kind of person that you could ever think of walking down the Strip. From everybody from all walks of life, from every country. And I mean, the desert alone. I mean, if you've never actually walked in the desert, you can feel scared. You can feel small. You can feel, all kinds of crazy emotions and that sort of thing. Because for me, at least, the desert is mysterious. It may, a lot of people think, oh, it's just a bunch of dirt with some cactuses and stuff. But if you actually go out and look up at the sky and see the desert and smell it and feel it, you could get tons of. Any fantasy author should come to Vegas and actually go walk in the desert, because you got, your apocalyptic story right there. If you ever, I think a lot of apocalyptic stories, as far as like nuclear war and that sort of thing, you have a Earth that basically got turned to desert, and right there, you walk out in the desert and there's your story. There's your apocalyptic universe. Right. But I mean, it's easy to write a story out here. It's it's not hard. I would think, it's easy anywhere, but where you're from, Mississippi, I mean, come on. There's like lore down there. There's stories in every corner, and the same goes for, out here.
Yeah, it's just about opening your eyes and opening your ears, listening to the people, looking around at the setting, and stories are everywhere.
Yeah.
You said something earlier and about writer's block, and I'm with you that I think writer's block either comes from being lazy or being distracted, or from just not trusting yourself enough to interpret what you're seeing, and the people that say that they can't come up with an idea for a story, I just shake my head, because that's impossible.
Yeah, it should be writers, I don't want to do it block.
Right.
Writers will find something else to do block. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's talk about a couple of your stories. Tell me about Gramps, the time travel story.
That was in Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. I can't remember what number that was. I think it was
number 16.
16, maybe, the time travel one. That is basically just your normal everyday time travel story with my own twist on it. I mean, I think that a lot of stories have been told a million times, but you just put your own twist on it and kind of, go with it. It's about a guy that goes back to see his dying grandfather, and his grandfather shows him that everything isn't how it always seems to be, I guess. Yeah.
I love a good time travel story, and a lot of the stuff I write has at least some sort of time travel element to it. For me, I think it's I like to explore the idea of getting a second chance at something, getting to maybe right a wrong, or maybe not even that kind of plain and simple, but there's something about the idea that things maybe are not final. That maybe everything's not written in stone, and that, like, I just kind of like to play with that idea some. But you said that this has your kind of stamp on it, or your, with your, what do you consider to be kind of your style, or kind of what your signature is? How do you describe what it is that you do that is special to Ernie Howard?
I'd say it's a little bit of a metaphysical twist. I like kind of a other dimensions kind of thing. This book is a time travel story that, the loop. You got to complete the loop kind of thing, where if this doesn't happen, then this won't happen. And it's the old kill your grandpa story. If you killed your grandpa, would you exist kind of thing. But he's not out to kill his grandpa. If you don't save your grandpa, what happens? But I would say that the whole metaphysical alternate dimension kind of thing is my stamp. I love talking about like kind of what you just said, just the possibilities, the makeup of our reality and what is reality. Is reality like the old Joe Rogan? You say you listen to him, and he always said that is reality what you can knock your fist on and that sort of thing. And I like asking questions about that. What exactly is reality? And I guess that's why people think that some of my stories are kind of Twilight Zone-y, but I take that as a compliment, because the Twilight Zone was awesome. The old Twilight, the writing in that, like Richard Matheson wrote a ton of those episodes, and that guy was the best. There wouldn't be a Stephen King. You want to talk about like time travel? What happens if Richard Matheson doesn't exist? You wouldn't have Stephen King. You wouldn't have a ton of other writers. He was awesome.
Yeah, Chris Porto and I were talking about Twilight Zone. Maybe like a year and a half or 2 years ago, we were talking about it, and we each went to Netflix and started watching some of the old black and white episodes. And man, those things still hold up and are still creepy as hell. Some of them.
Oh yeah.
Totally. Just I learned so much from them for especially some of the black and white ones, because you're required to do things off screen, and it's the building of tension that gets the viewer or the reader a whole lot more than just in your face slasher stuff. You can creep somebody out so much more by not giving them what's going on. And I think writers it would really be a big service to go watch some of those episodes and see how to to learn to play with nuance. That's something a lot of young writers I think get wrong, because they try to just throw everything on the page. And something that's like B.B. King said, it's the space between the notes.
Yeah.
That is so important sometimes.
What's jazz? What's the old jazz saying? It's the notes he's not playing that make the jazz. And I think honestly, like exactly what you said, and it's you're talking about like when the Twilight, all those episodes came out, they weren't that far away from no TV and just doing radio shows, like the old radio shows and that sort of thing, where they had to tell you a story, and it was it took talent to tell a story and actually have lead up and tone. And that's tone is like the biggest thing. I love movies I watch all have a certain tone, and I think music has a tone, and I think writing a story, if you can get the tone right, it's all about that. And the old Twilight Zones have this certain tone about them. They're all different stories, but they're all you kind of know what's gonna happen, but then you kind of don't know what's gonna happen, and they don't make it easy for you, and I like that.
Yeah. Another thing about some of those episodes is they are kind of perfectly encapsulated short stories. Like they translate to the short story format so easily. And you write a ton of short stories, as well as longer stuff. But, I kind of get the feeling that you're a lot like me, in that you love the format of the shorter story and kind of the single scene, or, a couple of, kind of tight viewpoint. What is it about writing short stories that you like so much?
I like to have that aha moment quickly. I like it. I like when a short story when you read a story and it basically has no fat, and it just gets to the point, and you get that satisfaction almost. I'm I'm always looking for the satisfaction in the story. And if you get that last part, I love a story where you read it and then you get to that last part and you go, oh my God, I cannot believe this is what the story was about. You know what I'm saying? It totally gave you this, you thought it was going this way, and then it totally just flipped the script and no, this is the way it is. And I love that. And I try to write stories like that. And when I was like younger, all I wanted to read was like Cemetery Dance, would put out a bunch of short story anthologies. I used to love anthologies. One of my favorites recently was Wasteland, The Wastelands. I love short story anthologies, and I think writing a short story is kind of a lost art, and I think more people should do it instead of, learn how to write it. A short story will teach you how to write a story. And I think too many people, when they first start out writing, don't start out writing short stories, and they should, because that's where you cut your teeth. That's where you're going to figure out how to write a story.
Well, it forces you to get a beginning, a middle, and an end, to complete something, and to grab the reader's attention, hold it all the way. There's so many things you learn from writing short stories.
Yeah.
I was reading. I've been reading a lot of author biographies lately, and especially some of the kind of old science fiction masters. Like Isaac Asimov's and Ray Bradbury. Yeah. And, I think it was Ray Bradbury that was talking about, writing a short story a week. And, he would begin on Monday, he'd write the whole story. Tuesday, he would revise. Thursday, he would revise. Friday, he would revise. And Saturday, he would send it out on submission. And then Sunday, he'd start gearing up for, what the next story would be. And he did that every week, and he wrote something like 600 short stories. It's crazy, Yeah. And I think Robert Heinlein never repeated himself. And I think it was, I'm getting them confused now, but I think it was Robert Heinlein that said, start writing short stories. And I dare you, when you write, if you write one a week for a year, I dare you to write 50 bad stories. Just the process. You're eventually gonna hit on, what makes it work. And but you got to do it. You got to do the work.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. And Bradbury writing one story a week, that's amazing to me, because that guy probably protected his writing time like a pit bull.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you'd have to. One of the great writing books that people should actually read is it Zen and the Art of Writing?
Yes.
By him. That is the greatest book, and he talks about it. There's a story in it where he talks about he wrote his first short story all the way through and started crying, and that is just such a great story, because I've never really written a story and then just started bawling or anything, but he talks about how it gives you a little bit of a motivation because you finish something, and I think as a writer one of the most important things is to finish, no matter if it stinks or whatever, just finish the story. If you're writing a novel, don't just give up because you're like, oh, I'm the crappiest writer in the world, and then you give up and then it sits and gathers dust and, and then you go back to it 3 years down the road and you go, wow, I wish I would have just kept writing,
Exactly.
Just keep writing and just finish it. And that is such a good feeling and such a motivator if you just finish the story. And that's why people should start writing short stories, in my opinion, because you can sit back, you can take in your whole world, your whole little universe in that story, and you can look at all the parts really easily, rather than when you write a novel, you got to kind of, keep track of what's what and that sort of thing. But you write 5,000 words short story, you can actually see everything at once, Yeah.
And he goes on to tell this great story in that same book about discovering the typing room at the college he was nearby, and it was like a dime for 30 minutes access to a typewriter. And he took a pocket full of dimes, and he wrote Fahrenheit 451 in like 9 days, with his roll of dimes. And that's because, he was able to write that book that's still, amazing, and is still as poignant and pertinent today as it was the day he wrote it. And it's because he had spent so much time writing short stories. He knew how to tell a story. And it was all that time in the trenches that then allows you to write something like a Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah. And you've actually said this. You talked about this a couple months ago about how writing a little bit faster and not editing yourself whatsoever helps you. I think if you write fast and don't self-edit, just write fast, write your story, get it down on paper, and then go back. Because the editing process is the real writing, in my opinion.
That's right. That's right.
And the first draft is just the mechanics of it,
That's right. And you can't edit a blank page. You got to have something down for the editor mind, to start working on.
That is the truth.
So yeah. And I've actually started, and I've got a question for you about how you do things, because I've seen you talk about it. But I've started writing in a plain text editor on my computer. It's full screen, and you just type. I mean, there's no layout, tools and all that. Because I'm a tool nerd, man. I will completely nerd out. And the next thing I know, I've spent 3 hours in getting all my margins set the way I want them in Microsoft Word. And, I just get lost in it. And, so I just use this plain text editor, and it allows me just to get words out. Yeah. And that's it. And you do something kind of similar, but you write everything in longhand, don't you?
I write mostly, I will write, basically almost the whole first draft of the book on a legal pad with a pencil. And it's not really a wow thing. Everybody says wow just because we live in the 21st century, but this is the way that things have been done for a long time. The whole quill and ink thing, but it's just how my brain works. And that's one of the things, is you just got to find your own nuance. You got to find your own habit. And my brain works with yellow legal pads. I like a yellow legal pad and a pencil. I like the way the pencil sounds, and it almost triggers something in my brain that makes me get into that flow state, I guess. And it's just almost the smell of the paper and the sound of the pencil. I'm a weirdo. I'm sorry.
Well, and if you look up, 2 or 3 lines that you wrote previously, there's no, oh man, I wish I could move this sentence here. Yeah, I just got to leave it. I'll fix it when I type it into the computer. It's on the paper. There's nothing I can do about it.
Then I go back and I actually use the computer, and I'm like what would I be called? Not a stenographer. Is that a stenographer? That are just somebody dictating you. You're actually dictating to yourself the story.
You're the transcriptionist.
Yeah, there you go. There's the word.
You're transcribing it, yeah.
Can you tell I write books and I can't think of words?
I love it.
I can seriously think of words all day. You put like a piece of paper or whatever, and then I start talking about writing and I can't think of the words. I can't think of it.
I'm the same way.
The other day with my wife, what's that one word? What is that one word? She's like, I don't know. The.
Oh, that's amazing. We love you, Sonia. That's just
he's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, I love seeing you guys on Facebook, because you just make me smile. That your family's great.
She's going to be putting out her little cookbook pretty soon here. I'm trying to get her motivated, but she's a very busy woman.
Oh, I can't wait. That's going to be awesome. Do it.
Yep.
That'd be great. Before we go, Ernie, tell me about the life of ants. That's such a great cover that you've got on there. What's the story about, and where'd the idea for it come from?
The idea came from a YouTube video with Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he was talking about how aliens might have already came here and, studied us, and then basically went, they're not smart enough. We're gonna go. Are you know? Are they come back periodically and watch us like they would, like you would a ant farm? You know what I'm saying? Like their little kid. You know, our kids are like drawing a picture in kindergarten. They're like, look, Billy drew a picture of the sun and flowers, and their kids are like, oh, look at little Schmarndorf did some physics. You know, let's put it on the refrigerator. So basically, it's just about us being a little bit egotistical and not realizing that it would only take about 1% more of like intelligence to surpass our intelligence. Who's to say what intelligence is when all you have to go on is your own level of human intelligence? So basically and it's just it's about a guy that meets up with an alien, and then a woman that meets up with an alien, and then they meet up, and then they have a child, which is in the next episode, and the child has alien DNA in her.
That's awesome.
Yep. Dun dun dun.
And you're publishing that episodically?
Yeah, I'm trying to. I've done 2 so far, and I'm working on another. I'm trying to. Well, not trying to. I am working on a longer version novel called Melody 8, which I shared the cover on Facebook, but that's about all I'm going to share. It's kind of a apocalyptic book, and it has a lot to do with music and that sort of thing, but music in fantasy, like using music as a weapon.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
But that's way down the road.
Well, we'll definitely be looking forward to it. Ernie, where can people connect with you if they're familiar with work, want to kind of dig in and find out more about the weird stories that you tell?
You can go to my blog, which is ErnieHowardWrites.com, and you can check me out on Amazon, and Amazon, just Ernie Howard, and obviously Facebook. And I basically friend everybody that does request. So just send me a friend request and let's be friends.
Awesome.
Please no politics.
Yeah. Let's leave that at home, people.
You want to talk about writing? You want to talk about the cat video that you saw? Let's do it. But anything else, leave it at the door. I don't want to hear about it.
There you go. Ernie, it's always a pleasure to get to hang out with you, buddy. Thank you for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure to hang out with you, man. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Natalie, it's Artie. Listen, I'm going to be late for dinner. I ran out of gas on... He climbed out of the car and peered at the sign. On Sleepy Hollow Road. There's nothing but trees, and I have to find a gas station. Save me a drumstick. He hung up his cell and stuck it in his pocket, zipping his jacket. He was going to have to walk and pray somebody picked him up. A sliver of crescent moon hung above, surrounded by clouds, like a grinning drunk asleep in a puddle. Artie walked, using his tablet as a flashlight, eyes on the gravel ahead. He crossed over a dark ravine. The trunks and overhanging branches were matted thick with wild grapevines and threw a cavernous gloom over the road. A figure stood at a crossroads ahead. It looked pale and wan and blue. A woman? He had an impression of fragility and age, and thought of his warty old landlady. But his landlady would not be standing at a crossroads in the dark. "Excuse me?" Artie said, surprised by the fear in his own voice. "Do you know where I can find a gas station? I'm empty." "Then let me fill you," the figure whispered. It rushed at him. It entered him. He dropped the tablet, fell to his knees, and lost his body to another driver. When Artie woke again, he was dangling in midair. The woods were pitch black. The only lights were fireflies, Fireflies everywhere, like dancing stars. He struggled and cried out, his yellow sneakers trying to find the ground.
"Shh," said a voice. "It will all be over soon."
Panic rose. He felt invisible hands on his legs, on his arms, invisible fingers around his neck, reaching up the back of his shirt. He heard the sound of water running below, high and agitated, as if through a stony brook. The crescent moon swung out of the sky, falling into the water. Blood rushed into his cheeks. He realized he had been flipped upside down. He yelled and groped, flecking his own face with spit, helpless to drive away whatever was attacking him. He felt a sharp pain between his shoulder blades, and air flew out of his lungs. A spray of blood hit his cheeks, hot and clinging. His hands found a sharp branch protruding from his body. It had speared him through his back and out through his chest. He tried to say help, but had no air to form the word. Blood poured up his body. No, it poured down. It only felt as if it were rising, climbing his neck, covering his face, gathering in his scalp. He reached for the ribbon of blood that fell from his crown into the trickle of moonlight below. The ribbon slipped through his fingers. It thinned, choked, became a tiny rivulet. His tanks were empty. Not even fumes. His engine began to sputter. The flow became a drip, a maddening drip like the drip, drip, drip of his kitchen faucet. The drip his landlady hadn't fixed. The drip that kept him up at night. This drip would not be keeping him up. He would sleep very well this night. Very well indeed. The fireflies slipped into shadow. A figure appeared, blue as gaslight, bony and toothless. A crone from a fairy tale.
"Thank you, my friends," she whispered. "I am thankful for this good harvest."
She neared, scrutinized him with manic intensity, and turned away, muttering to herself in a sing-song rhythm as she, too, vanished into the trees.
"A man may toil from sun to sun, but a woman's work is never done."